Hey, 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 what's up, family? And welcome to yet another episode of the Church Systems Podcast. Man, listen, I hope y'all are having as much fun with this as I am. Your feedback has been encouraging, like it's been awesome to hear. And to really just get to see that, man, what we're sharing is really making a difference. For those of you I don't know, my name is Henry. I'm the owner and founder of Simple Systems Consulting, and we exist to help leaders grow the church without burning out and without compromising. So, listen, in today's episode, we've got something really good for you. We started talking about the ripple effect in our last episode. We're talking about how leadership really makes a difference and how the effects of leadership really spans really throughout the organization. And today we're going to continue in that, but we're going to be talking about growth by design. That's right, growth by design. And in this idea of growth by design, really what we're going to be diving into is we're going to be diving into the value and the beauty of strategic leadership. We're going to talk about having a strategic path to walk on and to go down when it comes to leadership. You know, so often, so many leaders are hoping for growth. They're hoping for improvement. And while hope is something that we must maintain, hope itself is not a strategy, right? Hope is not a strategy. We've got to do more than just hope that things go in the right direction. We've got to have a plan to get there. And I want to show you that faith and strategy are not in competition with each other. As a matter of fact, they work together. I believe that some of the best examples of faith that we could ever find came with a strategy. It came with a plan, a goal for how we were going to move from where we are to where we're headed. And that's what we're going to dive in today. We're going to dive into the strategic path to growth. All right. And so as we're going to dive into that, I want to share something with you that I think is important for you to know because it's very near and dear to my heart. And that is this: we're on a journey to 10,000. That's right. 10,000 disciples. That's our goal as a company. We want to make 10,000 disciples. We want to be a part of making 10,000 disciples in the next 5 years. That means we are looking for 100 churches who want to partner with us to make 100 disciples. And I hope that you want to be one of those churches, that you want to start the journey now, saying, hey, starting with this episode, starting with this training, let's go on a journey to make 100 disciples. Here's why we want to do that. Because 10 attendees could be a big difference for you. 100 attendees could be a big difference. Maybe even 100 volunteers. Think about how transformative that is. And if 100 volunteers or 100 attendees could change your church, imagine the difference you can make with 100 disciples. Jesus didn't just have 12 ministers. He didn't just have 12 volunteers. He had 12 disciples. And with 12 disciples, he turned the world upside down. And I want you to imagine what you could do if you had 100 people really becoming disciples. And that's what we're about. We're about helping people really move towards discipleship, not just church membership, not just church attendance, not just volunteering, not just serving, not just giving, but disciples that's doing all of those things and more. And that's what we really want to help you do. That's really where our heart sits. That's really something that's super, super important to us. That's really something that has an extremely, extremely, extremely high value to us. And that's what we want to help you do. All right. So let's jump into this episode and let's really get to it, right? Because really what I want to do today is I want to help you understand intentional and strategic growth, right? I want you to understand not just the idea that we want to grow, but needing a plan to get there. And I'm going to show you some components of exactly how to do it. That's what we do. We don't just want to talk about it. I want to give you some tools so you can go back, sit down, watch this episode with your team, listen to this episode with your team, send it to your leaders and say, hey, here's our discussion for this week. Let's walk into it. All right. So let's talk about this. Number one, let's talk about understanding how intentional and strategic planning is crucial for ministry growth. I say this all the time, but I will say it again and I will keep on saying it until I cannot say it anymore. Inconsistent sowing leads to inconsistent harvest. When you don't have a consistent plan for what you put in, then what you put out will also be inconsistent to match what you did, what you give. All right. So let's say you invite a person to church once every 3 months, right? And maybe you don't even have that kind of rhythm. You invite somebody, today, and then you invite the next person in 3 months, and then the next person maybe in 2 more months. Don't be surprised if you have inconsistent guests, right? Your outcomes will match your input. And so, what you need to learn to do, because some outcomes you can't control, you can't force people to take an action, you can't force people to do things, but you can control your action. And so, what you need to understand is how to be intentional. You need to be intentional, which means that you need to understand that there are a lot of things that are up to God, but there are some things that are up to you. And those things that are up to you, you need to decide that I'm going to intentionally take these actions. I'm going to intentionally go down this road. I'm going to intentionally move in this direction because I believe it will make a difference. And this is how we will move forward. And so you've got to be intentional. But then, even within being intentional, you've got to learn to be strategic, right? Because you can be intentional and random, right? You can be intentional, but doing random things. For example, you can be intentional about saying, hey, our leadership team is going to meet together once a month or once a week. That's intentional. But you could also be random by saying, when we get together, there's no agenda for what we're talking about. There's no plan for where we're going. There's no development portion where I'm training and teaching our leaders something that they may not have known. There's none of that existing. So, being in that scenario, being intentional is saying we're going to meet every week. But being strategic is saying, here is our template agenda that we will follow every single week to make sure that we're not wasting our time. Because being random and being unintentional and being non-strategic is one of the quickest ways to get people to check out. It's one of the quickest ways for people to start feeling like you're wasting their time, you're wasting their energy, and they will start to put less value on the meetings you call, on the things that you do, if there's not a strategic component. And so what you really need to grab is you really need to grab this idea that being strategic in ministry is not an option. If you're an entrepreneur, if you're in ministry, if you're a pastor, wherever you are, not being strategic, it isn't an option. That's a double negative. But you don't have that option. You have to be strategic in what you're called to do. All right. So let's talk about this. 3 things. All right. A couple things. Number one, let's talk about the importance of strategic growth. The importance of strategic growth. Strategic growth is essential for ministries. Because if you don't have strategic growth, what you might have is sporadic growth, random or sporadic growth that is not intentional, it is not consistent, it is not moving in the right direction. It is growth that is really not based and built around a real plan to move things forward. And so what you need is you need to start seeing the growth that you're praying for as strategic, in that you've got to pray like it depends on God, but you've got to plan and strategize like it depends on you. You've got to trust God to do his part, but then you've got to be committed to doing your part. You've got to know that God's will win out, right? That what he wants is going to come to pass, but you've also got to know that you have actions connected to what God wants to see happen. So many times in scripture, we see this, if you, then I, right? Where God says, if you do this, then I will do this. I believe one of the values of being strategic when it comes to the church and it comes to ministry is that our strategy and our strategic nature can then reach back and say to God, we're prepared. We're prepared for the people that we're praying for you to send. We're prepared to not let them fall through the cracks. We're prepared to take them beyond attending a church and to take them into being a part of a church. We're prepared to go beyond allowing them just to be attendees, and we're prepared to help turn them into disciples. We've got to understand that we're on a partnership, and a part of this partnership is us deciding that we're going to be strategic and intentional. Here's the other thing, is that if you're going to understand what it really means to see strategic growth, then that means you've got to choose to be proactive and not just reactive. See, when you're reactive, what you're doing is you're responding to what's happening around you. I like to call these kind of ministry leaders firemen, because they're constantly putting out fires, because all of their activity is based on a response, right? When you think about firemen, Firemen in general respond to emergencies. That's what they do, right? And they have a very valuable contribution to our culture, to our society. We need them. But as a spiritual leader, as an entrepreneur, as a leader in the kingdom of God, if you spend all of your time putting out fires, then you don't have time to build. Juxtapose a fireman to a builder, to an architect, right? If you're a fireman, you've got to go from one emergency to another. But if you're an architect, you get to sit down and intentionally craft what the future is going to look like. And that's what I'm challenging you to think about, is that you've got to move from being reactive to being proactive. If you're reactive, the enemy can stall your progress by simply throwing problems in front of you, because you will stop and you will stall at every turn to address the issues around you, instead of staying focused and having a proactive plan, a strategic plan to move forward and where you want to go. And that's what you've got to really begin to grab a hold of. You've got to decide that you're going to be a proactive leader who says, I am going to plan the action. I am going to plan the future before it creeps up on me. You've got to become the kind of leader who decides to move in that direction even before it becomes this thing that is normal to you and your culture, right? But you've got to decide that you're going to grab and you're going to hold on to the importance of strategic growth. Strategic growth will not become a thing in your church. It will not become a thing in your life. It will not become a thing in your business until you decide that this is important to us. You must decide that it has value. You must decide that it is worth committing to. You must decide that, because until you decide it, it's going to be a secondary issue. So you got to understand that. All right. The second thing I want you to know is you need to understand, if you're hearing me and you're like, man, this is great. I want to become more strategic. I've been more random. I just go with the flow. I show up, whatever the Lord give me to preach this morning is what I'm going to preach. Whatever the choir sing is what they're going to sing. Whoever shows up is who's going to show up, but I want to change because I see that that's not working. Well, I want to show you now some of the key components of a strategic growth plan, right? If you're setting out and saying, I want to be a strategic thinker, I want to be a strategic leader, then I am about to give you some of the components that you need to think through in order to get there. All right. Component number one is you need a crystal clear mission. Crystal clear mission. Your mission statement is more than just a statement that you put on the programs, that you put on your website, that you put on the wall. It really is the guiding star and the filter for who you are as an organization. When you have a clear mission statement, what you're saying to the world is, here is what makes us different from every other organization, right? Sometimes we think about this, and I use this analogy a lot. I say, what makes you different from the church down the street? But I want to change that. Because in general, churches, all of our mission statements really derive, I believe, from the Great Commission, right? So we've got some component of that. But here's what I want you to think about. In this day and age, especially in a post-Christian America, one of the things you need to be thinking about is not what makes you different, or not how do you explain what makes you different from the church down the street. You need to describe what makes you different from the organizations and the businesses down the street. What makes you different from the other things that are vying for people's love, attention, and focus? You've got to be able to lay that out. What makes you different from even a positive nonprofit organization? What makes your church different from the United Way? What makes your church different from the Red Cross? What makes your church different from the Boys and Girls Club? What makes your church different from the YMCA? You've got to be able to explain to people why it is worth their effort and their time to be a part of the church. Because I don't know if you know this or not, but people don't owe us church attendance, and they don't owe us church participation. And so you've got to think about how you will describe what makes you different. You've got to be able to say, this is one of the things that sets us apart. Another thing that's so important about a clear mission is that a clear mission is a filter. It's a filter. It will tell you the kind of things that you don't do. If you decide that your mission is about, hey, we're called to make disciples, and to grow people into, healthy Christ followers, whatever your mission is, then, when somebody comes to you, while your church is smaller than 50 people and says, hey, we should start a coffee shop, then you filter that idea through the mission, right? If we have a building and we have somebody who knows how to do this and we want to make disciples, we look at that and we ask ourselves, man, does this idea work alongside with us, achieving our mission? You filter everything through the mission. Here is why. Because so many people, and I believe even the enemy, will bring you so many good ideas in order to block you from your God idea. And you need to have a filter that helps you decide when you're on track and when you're off track. And a mission statement is one of those filters. The another thing that you need, this is another component of your strategic plan, is you need a clear vision, right? My mission says, here is ultimately what we're trying to accomplish. And in large part, your mission is never complete. It's a continual idea. It's something that no matter how successful we are, we never reach the end of it, right? That's a mission. That is what we're called to do. But a vision is, here is what the future will look like when we get there. Here's the future we're working towards. A vision evolves. You can write a vision. There was a time when people used to write a 20-year vision. I don't think you can do that today. I think time is moving too fast to plan that far in advance. But I think you can do a 3 to 5 year vision and have some semblance of what it will look like. And you may get there faster. You may, accomplish it, quicker or whatever. But a vision says when we get to where we're going, when we're doing what we're called to do, ultimately, here are all the things that we will see, right? That's a vision. You need to be able to clearly articulate where you're headed. If you want the team around you to really be able to partner with you in a significant way, then you've got to be able to describe to them, here's where we're going. Here's the future that's worth working for, right? We went to DC for spring break here recently. I had a chance to go to the MLK Memorial. I went to the Lincoln Memorial, and I went to all these different historic places in DC. And man, when I tell you, it gave me chills standing at the Lincoln Memorial reading the Gettysburg Address. Standing there and reading his inaugural speech, and just reading. And I got goosebumps standing there reading it because he casted a vision. Dr. King, I'm standing there and I'm reading his quotes and I'm looking at all the things that he did. He casted with his I Have a Dream speech right there on the National Mall. I'm standing there watching. I'm standing there looking at the reflecting pool, and I'm looking and I'm going like, man, this is where he made that statement. This is where he told us about his dream, right? And I even read the story. It said that Dr. King did not even plan. That was not even a part of his speech to talk about I Have a Dream. So it's ironic that it's called the I Have a Dream speech, because as the story goes, the people around him were saying, tell him about the dream, tell him about the dream. And then he began to go into this room where he says, I have a dream. He was casting a vision, and that vision got us excited. That vision got us excited about where he was going. Do you have a vision that can get people excited about where you're going? People have too many choices to settle for a vision that is uninspiring. And I believe this lack of vision is one of the 10 church killers. It's one of the things that is killing churches. And you will be able to download my new ebook coming out really soon called The 10 Church Killers. And this is going to be one of them, because when you don't have a clear vision, people will walk away. I learned this a long time ago. A confused mind always says no. When people are unclear about what you're asking them to do and what you're asking them to be a part of, they will default to no. And so our visions need to be clear enough to say, here's where we're going. Even Jesus had a clear vision. When he called the first disciples, he said, follow me and I will make you fishers of men. That's a clear vision. He said, look, if you decide to come and follow me, that's on you. He says, then I'm going to take responsibility for transforming who you are. And at the end of the day, just like you fishing for people, I'm going to teach you how to catch men. Just like you're fishing now, I'm going to teach you how to catch men. That's a clear vision. So you need a clear mission. You need a clear vision. Number 3, you need to be clear on what the needs are. What are the needs of your community? What are the needs of the people you're trying to reach? What are the needs of your church, right? Are you willing? Here's a difference maker. Let's go ahead and get honest. Let's just go ahead and get honest right here. Here's a difference maker for you. And this is going to decide what kind of leader you are. Are you willing to have the hard conversations about what's right and what's wrong in your church? Are you willing to have the hard conversations about what's right, what's good, and what's not so good about you as a leader? What are your strengths? Right? You're a good preacher. You love on people, but what are your weaknesses? You're not a planner. You're not administrative, right? This is going to make all the difference. You've got to learn to stop and assess where you are. You've got to learn to stop. Look, I just went through this process. I just started remaking everything. I'm remaking our website, which you can go and check out now at getchurchsystems.com. I remade all of our offers, how we sell, or what we have, how we minister to people, how we help them, what problems can we solve. I remade all of that because I stopped and I got feedback from the people we were serving. We just redid our onboarding process. And we did all of these things because we were assessing. We're constantly assessing. How are we doing? Are we doing well? All right. When you do an assessment, you might discover that you have spent the last 5 years investing in a strategy that's not working. It's just not working. It's just not happening. And you're investing your time into it. You're investing your energy into it. You're putting all of this stuff into it, and it's not working. It's just not working. And so you need to stop and you need to assess. You need to assess what needs to be addressed in our church, in my leadership, in our team, in our community. That's 4 levels: in you, in your team, in your church, and in your community. What needs to be addressed? You need to stop and you need to assess it. You don't want to spend all of your energy shooting at a target that no one is going to respond to, right? Let's say, I'll give you an example. I think of it like if I wanted to be an entrepreneur, I wanted to start a business. And I said, man, I'm really tired of that little red light that comes on my camera to let me know I'm recording. So you know what? I'm going to put a black sticker over it so I can't see it. Right. And imagine I want to create that product, but everybody else uses that button, that light as an indicator. They need to see it so they know when the camera's on. Right. And so if I put $1 million into solving that problem that nobody else wants to solve, I just wasted $1 million. Versus if I say, man, when I'm not using my camera, I want something that covers the lens. So just for extra security, to make sure that nobody's looking at me through my camera. See, that's a different problem. But you have to go through assessment in order to be able to identify exactly where people are. And that's one of the things that's a part of your strategic plan. You have a clear mission, a clear vision, but you also need to do an assessment of yourself, your team, your church, and your community. All right. Here's another thing that's a component of your strategic growth plan is you need to set goals. You need goals, right? You need, and I love the term SMART goals. Goals that are specific, they're measurable, they're achievable, they're relevant, and they're time bound, right? You want to set specific goals. You need a target to aim at. I know we're aiming for the vision, but what are the things that we'll hit along the way? When we do the mission makeover, one of the things that we do in that mission makeover, or we do in our ministry map workshop, is that we give you a strategic set of goals. And we say, hey, on the way to your big vision, here are the things that you need to hit. If you hit these things on the way, eventually you'll find yourself at this destination. You need the same. You need goals, and you need them not just for yourself, but you need them for the people on your team. The people on your team need goals. The people on your team need to know, hey, here's where we're going. Here's what we're trying to achieve. Here's what we're trying to accomplish. You need those things, right? You need to make sure that you have goals in front of you that are going to hold you accountable, right? That's how you hold people accountable. You put goals on paper and you say, here's where we're going. Here's when I need us to be there. Now let's get it done. All right. That's how you hold people accountable, right? You don't hold people accountable by just expecting things of them. You don't hold them accountable by just hoping they do it. You hold them accountable by letting them know where we're going, charting the path, and saying, hey, here are the markers I need you to hit on the way. All right. Last part that I'll give you, last component of your strategic growth plan is you need support systems. You need support systems. If you're going to have a real plan to grow, you need to have the systems in place that will support you in getting there. As a church, as a business owner, what systems do you need? Right? Do you have a CRM or a CHMS? If you're a church management software. If you're a business, a customer relationship manager, right? Or a congregational relationship manager. Do you have a database where you can hold all your people? Do you have a blueprint through which you can text and email and communicate with people? Do you have all those things in place so that things can move forward? You need the systems to support where you're trying to go, right? If you're trying to add 100 people to your church in the next 1 year, you need the software and the systems to support that. You need the software and the systems to support that, because adding 100 people sounds great until you've got to do everything manually, until you've got to manually make phone calls, until you've got to manually reach out to them, until you've got to manually do all these things. Everything seems great until everything becomes manual. And so what you need to do is you need to figure out what kind of software or what kind of system support can you add to help you get where you need to go. All right, so let's recap key components of a strategic plan. You need a clear mission and vision. You need a community assessment. You need to do an assessment on yourself, your team, your church, and your community. You need to set SMART goals, and then you need the systems that will support you going where you're trying to go, or going where God's called you to go. All right. Here's another thing I want to give you. All right. Let's talk about now, if you understand, okay, here's the components of my strategic goal. Now let's talk about how to overcome common barriers to growth. Because I don't know if you know this, but there are some barriers to your growth. You've got some barriers to your growth. You've got some serious things that are standing in front of you. And sometimes those barriers aren't what you think. Sometimes those barriers go beyond what you assume. Sometimes those barriers are, obstacles and issues, they're facility problems, they're location issues, but sometimes those barriers are mindsets. They're the way some people think. They're the way some people approach ministry. They're all these different things. So let's talk a little bit about how to overcome some of those barriers. All right. Number one, you need to identify your unique challenges. When you look at your church, what feels like it's in the way? If you could pray and say, God, man, if you would move this thing out of the way, it would change everything. What are the things that you would ask to be moved out of the way? You need to know what your challenges are. All right. But coming along with that, you cannot assume that somebody else's barriers are your barriers, right? I see this too often. Leaders who take the barriers that they see other people facing or talking about and assume, man, I got the same barriers. You don't have the same barriers, right? Like both of you might have 5 leaders, but you might have 5 focus leaders. You might have 5 leaders who fit exactly what you need right now, while somebody else might have 5 leaders who are they're tired and they're not in a space where they're ready to commit and to work and to do some stuff. Don't make other people's barriers your own. And don't make your barriers other people's. You need to identify what your unique barriers are. Like, what's your barrier? And I want you to chase it down to the lowest common denominator. All right, let me give you an example, right? Because maybe you're listening to you saying, man, my barrier is finances. If I had more resources, I could do more. And I want to say to you, I need you to dig deeper. Why don't you have finances? Right? You need to be able to answer that question. And don't just hit me with the when my people don't give. Okay, why don't they give? Why don't they give? All right, here are some things to think about with that. You're talking about your people don't give and all of those kind of things. Let's wrestle with that a little bit. All right. Number one, are you teaching on giving multiple times a year? And are you teaching from a biblical perspective why we give? Tracing back to Melchizedek, coming forward into the law, going through Malachi and coming into the dispensation of grace? Have you taught them why we give? Number two, have you connected giving to going? Can you show them what happens or what has happened when they've given in the past? Or can you even show them what you will do when they give? Because get this, most average people as excited about church stuff as pastors are. So saying, man, when y'all give, we're going to have a bigger building. Okay. Like most people aren't as excited about that, especially in the emerging generations. They're not as excited about that. They're not as excited about the trinkets that sometimes we as pastors can be excited about. Can you connect them and show them the difference that we're going to make in the world when we give? Can you show them how you're going to leverage their resources to go on mission? Can you cast a vision for how many people we're going to feed? How many homeless we're going to help? How many naked we're going to clothe? How many prisoners we're going to visit? How many former addicts we're going to help rehabilitate? Can you connect their giving to a larger mission and vision? This is why I told you, you've got to have a clear vision. People need to know where you're going and what you're about to do. They need to be able to see it. They need to be able to know it. They need to be able to wrestle with it, right? But that's one barrier. So you need to know what your challenges are, right? You say it's lack of resource. Here's another common one. You say, man, my people don't want to move. My people don't want to change, right? And that could be absolutely true, right? But while that's a barrier, your bigger barrier could be that you have not yet gone out to reach the new people who would help you change the culture, right? If you've got a church, let's say you got a church of 50 people, right? 50 to 100, wherever you are, just plug your number in there. If you've got a church of 50 people and they're stubborn and or they're hurt or they're gun shy because either you've tried things in the past that didn't work or previous pastors have tried things in the past that didn't work or whatever it is, or you've got a church full of people who are from a generation who did everything and now they tired and they don't want to do nothing, right? And you're saying, man, they're resistant to change. They just won't go with me. If you've got a church of 50 people that's like that, you know, let me tell you how easy it is to change that culture. You go reach 50 new people. You go reach 50 new people. And I know, man, I bring these new people in here. The old people going to run them off. They're going to do this. Man, first of all, you got to pray, but then you got to get creative, man. Like if you've got a traditional service at 11 o'clock and, you know, it's, you know, traditional people and all of that kind of stuff like that. Well, what if you added a 1 o'clock p.m. service and said, with this 1 p.m. service, we want to do a contemporary service or whatever you want to call it. And you go out there and you scrounge up some people who will go with you. You go find get your musician on board and say, man, look, can you just sing these type of songs for me? Get you a praise team together instead of a choir. And you say, hey, look, we're going to stand out and we're going to do this, whatever it may be. Like you do that and then you go get those new people. And you bring them in and you plug them in, man. And you have fun with those new people. And watch how fast the stuck people become unstuck when they see how much fun and how much joy there is in this new group. I'm just giving you an idea, right? My point is this, is you got to know what your challenges are, but don't just stop at what you see on the surface. Don't just stop at complaining about the big thing that you see in front of you. Move forward into getting down into the nitty-gritty of what the real issue is. Maybe it's not we don't have enough money. Maybe it's that we simply haven't taught enough on giving. Maybe it's not that our people won't move with us. Maybe we're trying to change people who have been a certain way for 50, 60 years. And what the solution is to go out and to reach the next wave, right? You got to start to grab that. You got to start to grab that. You know, as I get older, I have more people in my life who are also older. And what I've learned, man, once you get to a certain age, like a part of the gift that I give you is the freedom to be who you are. Like expecting you to make a full change at 70 and 80 and 90 years old is just unrealistic. And so what you've got to do is you got to figure out what the real issues are and, develop a solution to go forward. All right. So you've got to go beyond those barriers because you can. I'm telling you, you can. You can do it. You can get to the other side of it, but you've got to be willing to be creative. You've got to be willing to do things and to see things differently. You've got to be willing to say, I'm not scared to try some new things to go forward. Right. And if you don't know what to do for yourself, get some help. All right. So now you know the components, you're identifying your growth barriers, and now let's talk about implementation. How once you have a plan, how do you implement it? Implement it, man. I feel like I'm giving y'all so much value in this episode. Like this is a whole masterclass right here. Like I'm giving you everything. All right. So now, how do you implement it? Right now that you know what it is, now that you got it in front of you, how do you actually implement this thing, right? How do you actually take the steps and begin to go forward? All right. So here's a couple of things that you need to do. Number one is you need to get this plan on paper. You need to get it on paper. This cannot be something that's just rolling around in your head. You need to get it on paper. And I say on paper, you can put it, on your computer, you could type it up, whatever it is, but you need to get a plan down, man. You need to get a plan locked in that says, hey, look, here's who we are, here's where we're going. You need to get that plan on paper so you can easily share it with other people when the time is right. Right. You need to get that thing on paper. So when other people come saying, how can I help? How can I be a part? You want to make sure that you have everything they need. And a part of that is getting it down on paper. All right. But then once you get it on paper, now you need to begin to look at it and begin to ask yourself, where do people fit? You have people around you, you have teams around you. How do they fit into the plan that God has given you? How do they fit? How do they partner up with that thing? How do they come alongside that thing and be a part of what it is that God is inviting and asking you to do? You need to know. You need to know how people fit in. You need to know how people plug in. You need to know how others can support you and how you can support them in doing and being what God has called them to be. All right. So you've got to know exactly where people fit. All right. Here's another part of that. You need to know who you need, right? Who does help look like? This is good. I need you to get this. Who does help look like? I know we often say, what does help look like? But who does help look like? You need to think about who you need to come alongside you and partner with you for what God's called you to do. When God has called you to do something, he very rarely calls you to do it alone. So you need to ask, who is it that God has called to come and partner with you? And so if you're going to implement this well, you need to understand the people you need. And once you understand who they are, then you need to be prepared to bring them in and to allow them to fulfill the part of the strategic plan that God has given you. And that just comes with clarity. Again, if you do all the things before, the implementation becomes much, much easier. But you've got to know who they are, right? You've got to be prepared to actually do this and to put it in place, all right? And then here's the next thing you're going to do. If you're going to implement this plan, if you're going to implement your strategic plan, you need to have a map. You need to have a map. And what I mean by that is I would suggest breaking your plan into phases. What's phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, phase 5? What are the phases that you need to go through in order to achieve this plan? Because it's not going to happen all at once. And in my experience, people will get overwhelmed and afraid and scared if you give them too much at once. And so you need to know who can handle seeing the whole plan and who can only handle seeing it a phase at a time. To say, okay, look, here's what we're doing for the next 3 months. Here's what we're doing the 3 months after that, blah, blah, blah. So you need to break that thing out and you need to put it through. All right. And here's another thing that you need to do. If you're going to implement this strategic plan, you have got to lead. You've got to lead, because if this thing is going to be seen through, you've got to be willing to lead. And leading means delegating, but also it means following up. It means that you're going to have times where it feels like you're chasing after people to get them to do what you've already assigned them to do or what they've already agreed to do. Sometimes it's going to feel that way. Sometimes it's going to feel like that, but you've got to keep on going. Sometimes it's going to feel like that, but you've got to keep on pushing. You've got to keep on moving forward. You've got to keep on taking the next step. You cannot give up on this thing, because what's on the other side is so valuable that it's worth it. I cannot tell you how many partners I've worked with, but I had to call them multiple times. And they get on the phone, we get on the call, and they go like, "Yeah, man, this is good. I'm ready. I want to do this, but I need like a day or two. Give me a day or two to talk to somebody." And I call them back in a day or two, and they don't answer. I call them back in a week, I don't hear back from them. And sometimes, man, there have been people who I've talked to, and they've been on my email list for a year, and then all of a sudden they pop up and say, "You know what? We ready to sign." But I never stopped emailing them. I never stopped texting them. I never stopped reaching out. And because I never stopped, it eventually pays off. And leadership is often the same way. You've got to be willing to keep on getting in the mud with your team, to keep on getting in the mud with your people until it comes to pass. And one of the reasons that you're doing that is because you're constantly monitoring progress. You're constantly saying, okay, where are we on this? Is this working? If it's not working, then you shift to something else. If it's not working, then you go to a different thing. If it's not working, then you go to the next part and you let that thing continue to evolve into what God has called it to be. But you have got to be willing to lead. All right, listen, we're going to close out. I really wanted to take some time and to give you this and to make sure you had it, but I want to give you a gift. I want to give you a free gift today. I want to give you my new ebook, one of my new ebooks, because I told you I got two of them, but one of my new ebooks called The Church Growth Blueprint. And it is a book that's all about transforming lives one invitation at a time. Basically, what I did is that I took my experience. I had invited three random strangers to church. They came to church, and within a week, they were 28 people in our church because those three brought us a whole lot more. And so I want to show you how it happened, and I want to show you how to get there. And so if you click the link that's in the description, I'm going to give you access to this new ebook, The Church Growth Blueprint. And in this ebook, you'll be able to get all the secrets. You'll be able to learn all the different things that you need to learn in order to see how to move this thing forward. Because here's my hope. My hope is that with this episode, you're inspired to go put together your church growth blueprint, that you're inspired to go put together your own strategic growth plan to move the needle forward. And if you need some help, that's okay. Look down in the description. You can click that link and you can check out our website and you can see all the different ways that we're serving churches. We've got the mission makeover where we will walk with you. I'll do a 45-minute call with you. And after that call, I'm going to put together a custom mission and vision document just for you. I'm going to help you get clarity in that area. We've got our church systems templates. If you need a specific system, you say, look, I just need help with volunteers, or I just need help with generosity, or I just need help with planning our worship service. You can go and you can get all of our systems templates, our entire blueprint, whichever you need. You don't have to get all of them. You just get them one. They're a la carte. You can get that. We've got our ministry map makeover, which is a workshop that we do with your team. We can do it virtually or in person, where I interview you, I talk to you, I get to know who you are, and I put together the full strategic plan for you. All the things that we just talked about, I put together the full strategic plan for you, whether I come to you on site or we do it online, whatever it is. We plan a whole weekend where we help you do just that. And then number 4, we've got our Church Systems Bootcamp, which is our 12-month coaching program where I get to walk with you and your team for 12 straight months. Is that we meet every week. We give you access to all of our systems, all of our documents, all our templates, all of our SOPs, all of our job descriptions. We give you access to everything all in one place, so we could do that. And then finally, we have a brand new offering, which is called the Virtual XP. And that's basically where you can have me as your executive pastor, where I will meet with your team, coach your team, hold them accountable, train them, and raise up. If you have somebody who you think will be your XP eventually, I will actually help train and raise them up to come alongside you and to make a difference. All right. So whatever you need, all you got to do is click below and we'll do our best to help you take those next steps. Listen, I know that this has been a blessing to you. If you've watched this long, you've listened this long, this has been a blessing to you. So now it's time for you to take the next step and to move into putting together your strategic growth plan. Listen, until next time, keep the gears turning. Peace.